dare say that most of us understand the term duty. We don't like it. Many times it brings about an idea of responsibility, of things that have to be done. And often we have our checklist, got to do this, got to do that. And it gets in the way sometimes of fun. And sometimes fun has become the major motivation for Americans today. And even in the church, it's nothing wrong with having a good time and having fun, but there are responsibilities that must be met. Before we can enjoy that meal, the food has to be prepared. Before the food can be prepared, it has to be purchased. Before it can be purchased, there has to be a job involved to earn money. So we see duty on a daily basis. We understand that. But when you think about duty, you think about requirement, responsibility. Have you ever asked yourself, what does God require? Now, sometimes we can take that to an unhealthy level as well and get this mindset of we got to work our way to heaven and it's all about us. And that's not what I'm talking about. But there is, and always has been with God, responsibility. And that takes me back to a passage that I wanted us to meditate upon this morning in the Old Testament, the book of Deuteronomy chapter 10. Deuteronomy chapter 10 records a time after Aaron has died. He's been buried. His son Eleazar is now the high priest, and Moses is recounting those events that took place. And what I want us to focus upon is verse 11. He says, "And the Lord said unto me, Arise and take thy journey before the people, that they may go in and possess the land which I swear unto their fathers to give unto them." We know that to be the land of Canaan. We know that to be the promised land. And of course, that would not fully be in their possession until the days of Joshua after Moses' death. And you read the book of Joshua and you see that they conquered that land. But it's a type of the eternal home that we're looking for, the promised land that God has promised to us, heaven. And so there's a responsibility in this to go into that land. But listen to what he says, verse 12. "And now, Israel, what doth the Lord require of thee?" So there's that idea then of the responsibility. If we're going to enter into this promised land, this is what God requires of us. Now, for us, of course, as we said, it's heaven. For them, it was the physical land of Canaan. But listen to what he says. Number one, if we're going to do these things, what God requires of them is to fear the Lord, to reverence and respect who he is, to stand in awe of his greatness. To be afraid to be on the wrong side of him fits in that as well, but it's more of an idea of reverence and respect toward him because he is God. He is the creator. It's a land that he promised to us, a gift from him. And so he says, if you want to do what's required of you, what the Lord requires of you, number one is to fear the Lord thy God. Then number two, to walk in all his ways. Not just some of them, not just the ones that we agree with, the ones we like. We're to walk in all of his ways. That hasn't changed. Oh, the law has changed. We're not under the law of Moses anymore. The 10 Commandments given to him, you see back earlier on in the chapter, the first couple of verses of this, he talks about hewing the stones and writing the law. We're not under the law of Moses today, but we're still under the law of God. And we're to fulfill the law of Christ, Galatians 6:2 says. So we're still under a law. So he requires us to walk in all of his ways. And then number three, to love him. To love him and serve the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul. To love him and to serve him. So you do what? You fear the Lord, number one. Walk in all of his ways, number two. Love the Lord. Now, love is the greatest emotion, and Jesus would say, if you love me, keep my commandments. We love him, and then we serve him. We serve him with a genuine heart. We serve him with all of our soul, with all of our being, with the core of who we are. Serve him because we love him, and because we love him, we walk in his ways, and because we walk in his ways, we show that we fear God. It goes back and forth. But then verse 13 says, to keep the commandments of the Lord, to keep the commandments and his statutes, which I command thee this day. Now here's what's important. For thy good. You see, sometimes we mess up this idea and the concept of keeping the law of God, of doing what's right, walking in the light, walking according to God's word, avoiding those temptations and sins that are out there in the world around us. And sometimes we feel that it's stifling and it holds us back. But if we're truly meditating on God's word, if we're truly getting the sense of what God is asking of us, we'll see in that last phrase of verse 13 that he says it's for our good. It's for the betterment of our lives. We talked our Bible study last Wednesday in John chapter 10, this idea of God comes to give us life, and not just any life, but a more abundant life. The thief, not so. John 10:10, the thief comes to steal, to kill, to destroy. But Jesus came that we might have life and have it more abundantly. But see, that abundant life sometimes is not what we think it would be. Sometimes I may think an abundant life would be a six-figure vehicle sitting in my driveway. No, that's not what I need. I don't need that to make an abundant life. Sometimes we think it's having the nicest clothes or having the most likes on Facebook or the most friends here. None of those things. No, that's not what's most important. The abundant life. The abundant life is fearing God and keeping His commandments, because that's the whole of man, Ecclesiastes 12, verse 13. And so here he is again saying, this is what is required of you, Israel, if you want to enter into the promised land. Moses didn't get to go into that promised land physically because Moses sinned, because Moses didn't fear God as he should. And God would say to Moses, because you believed me not to sanctify me before the people, you'll not enter into that rest. He died looking over the promised land. And he had to hand the reins over to Joshua, and Joshua led them into that land. But according to the book of Hebrews, even Joshua didn't give them the ultimate rest. Joshua gave them rest in that physical promised land, but God says through the Hebrew writer, there remaineth therefore a rest to the people of God. A rest in heaven, but we have to fear Him. We have to walk in His ways. We have to keep His commandments, His statutes. We have to love God, and we have to serve Him. This is what God requires of them. This is what God requires of you and of me today. Do you really love the Lord? Are you walking in His ways? Are you going to enter into that promised land? God's made everything available to us. The way is available to us. Go back and study again Deuteronomy chapter 10, the Old Testament books, those things written aforetime that are written for our learning. And find that patience and comfort of the Scriptures, and find that hope that you too can enter in to that land of rest. May God bless you till we meet again.